Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Focus today. It is an absolute pleasure. If you have any questions, please feel free to add those to the chat box and Nicole can answer those at the end. Everyone will stay muted while the presentation is moving forward. Otherwise, it is an absolute pleasure to introduce Nicole Palumbo to you today from PRC Saltillo. Nicole, take it away.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Focus, for having me today. I am very excited to be here. I learned about Focus quite a few years ago from a student of mine. So it's coming full circle for me now to be presenting to you all. I am very excited. So just some quick information here. My name is Nicole. I am a PRC Saltillo consultant. So I am an employee for PRC Saltillo. But before that, I was an SLP for 15 plus years now. And I worked in a variety of settings. My goal today, not only to show you my cute dog on this slide, but is to kind of talk about AAC in I call it device agnostic kind of way. So I don't want you to hear that I'm from PRC Saltillo, so I'm just talking about those specific products. I'm really talking about AAC in general, how we can implement it at home, customizations we can think through across a variety of different platforms out there. Because I know firsthand, being an SLP, that there are a lot of different options out there. So just listen with an open mind, ask questions, and we'll get started. So to kind of have this be a little more digestible, I thought it would be helpful for us to kind of set the stage, right? So we're going to be a star. And anytime we're becoming proficient or good at something in our lives, it could be playing a sport, playing an instrument, whatever that looks like, we need to practice and we need to build foundational skills. And the more we practice those foundational skills, the more automatic they become. So when we're thinking about AAC, we need to think about how we're going to set the stage, right? We want to set the stage. What do we want it to look like, right? How do we learn language? How does this apply to AAC, and how do we give them aided language input? Next, we'll meet the players. Sneak peek, you guys are involved there. So we'll meet our players, which are our communication partners. Then we'll learn about strategies for our communication partners and how we need to practice, right? Those foundational skills, practice them. And then we'll want to do a dress rehearsal where we get a chance to play with aided language input and see how it's going, right? Modify, change anything. It's kind of our first dress rehearsal run. And then finally, you guys get to take the stage, okay? And taking the stage means you're putting everything we talk about today into practice. And, you know, I think about this, take AAC, take speech and language out of it. My nephew wanted to play football, but he didn't want to do the skills and drills. He just wanted to go straight to the games, right? He's 10. He thinks the skills and drills are boring. He doesn't get it. And my sister is trying to explain to him that without those foundational skills and practicing, how are you going to know how to catch the football? How are you going to know how to throw the football? How do you even really know how the game works, right? You can't dive straight into the game. You have to practice. You have to feel more automatic in those easy skill things that you're doing, right? The running, the catching, the throwing, before you really know how to play the game. So needless to say, he then said, I don't want to play football anymore, right? And now he's playing some other sport that didn't require all the skills and drills, the same intensity level. But I need you guys to commit to the skills and drills. That's what we're going to talk about today. So we're setting that stage, okay? When we set the stage, let's ask a question. How long does it take to learn AAC? And let me just remind everybody that AAC is going to be, like I said, across any device, right? Or even maybe a low-tech system or a mid-tech system. So that augmentative and alternative communication system that we're using, how long does it take for them to learn? So once they get access, in this case, we're talking specifically about speech generating devices, we sort of have this feeling that they're just going to automatically know how to use it, right? They're going to be these competent communicators. And I think that's really unfair. And I get why we do it, right? We think, well, they know what they want to say. They just aren't able to get it out. And now that we've given them a tool to get it out, boom, they should be able to get it out. But that's not really how it works. So let's stop and think about language. When do we expect to hear a word with our typically developing children, right? When they're infants, we don't just expect them to come out and talk. We also don't talk to them in single words, right? We immerse them in language, and we're constantly giving. And we really don't expect to hear anything until maybe their first birthday or shortly after, right? So that's interesting. We're talking to them for a year. Sometimes we're talking to them in utero, reading them stories, doing all of these things. So how do we learn language? So we learn language by giving spoken language in, gives us spoken language out, right? So we talk to them, and then they talk back to us. But remember, we're looking at a year or more, okay? So this is kind of making sense, right? Like, especially when we consider how we learn language, we don't just give them exposure to it one time. There's repetition, there's variety. They're talking to everyone. If you've ever been around, once a toddler learns how to talk, they're talking to the stranger in the grocery store, right? So when we're thinking about those interactions that they're receiving them not just from their parents, they're receiving them from other children, extended family, peers, anyone that they can, right? So they're getting all of that repetition with variety. So I wanted to show you some numbers. I think numbers are helpful to kind of put things into perspective. So the first number is 4,000 to 6,000. That is the number of words typically developing children hear in the first year before they say their first word, right? 4,000 to 6,000. That's the number of words they hear. And we don't have an expectation that child is speaking during that time. This is just that exposure we were talking about. The number 500 is the number of times a child hears those first words before they say anything, right? And then 50 to 150, that's the number of models before an AAC user expresses the word independently. So they have to see somebody use their device and say that word 50 to 150 times before it really builds into their brain how they can then use it in an expressive manner. That's a lot. So I do want to make sure that I talk a little bit about aided language inputs, many names. Of course, in the speech world, we can't just keep it simple, have one name. We love to give it multiple names. But regardless, the principle is the same, okay? So you might hear me interchange between these. I just want you to know that the terms may differ, but the principle is the same. So we have aided language input, aided language stimulation, modeling. Modeling is one I hear a lot. Augmented language, partner augmented input. Okay, so there's lots of different terms. And to kind of summarize it, I'm going to show you a quick 2-minute video. Oh, you know what we didn't try is my videos. If you can't hear it, let me know. Well, this one just has music, but let's make sure you can see it. Things we didn't try. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pop this in the slide in the chat if it won't work. No. Okay. I'm going to pop this in the chat so that you can watch it later. This is one that I show so many of my new clinicians. I show new parents. It's done by Chris Bouguet, and what he does is he kind of incorporates what aided language stimulation is. And what I want you guys to keep in mind is that it doesn't happen quickly. Remember those numbers, 50 to 150. Okay. And I'll pop that in the chat at the end so you guys can see it on your own time. Okay, so what does aided language input look like? So when we first started learning how to use aided language input, we need to identify a few targets. And what we do is we still speak the same way we would speak to the child using a device, but we identify a few target words. And then in those target words, you model them by touching them on the device. So for example, this picture, you see that person is touching the word turn. So you could say, it's my turn, but you're only touching the word turn because that's the word you identified that you're going to model. Or maybe you're playing bubbles, right? And you can ask your AAC learner, who should go next? And you touch the word go, right? So I'm not limiting what I'm saying verbally to them, but I'm modeling maybe 1 or 2 target words. Or maybe you're playing on the swing and you're having fun. Let's do more swing. And you press the word more. So bottom line is that we need to learn AAC to speak AAC. And I was just with a teacher the other day who said, well, I can't teach her because I don't know it. And I said, that's exactly right. So you have to learn it, right? I couldn't teach my nephew football, like, at home on the side, so he didn't have to go to the skills and drills because I have no idea how to play football. But if I really wanted to be the best aunt I could be and teach him skills and drills, I would have to learn that first, right? So we have to learn AAC to speak AAC to our AAC users. So why aided language input? Like, why is this that buzzword that everybody's hearing? Why modeling? What are we talking about here? So it's actually a research-based intervention. So this means that the outcome of many research projects shows that it benefits the user and helps improve language for those that are using AAC. So right there, that's fantastic, right? The research is showing us it works. It helps to develop language skills. It helps us choose better words. It helps us slow down, which I can attest to as an SLP. Trying to find that word on every kid's device can be tricky, right? But that gives our AAC communicators a chance to understand us. And then that research shows us that it helps, right? So those reasons enough, I feel like, are good reasons for us to be using aided language input. So with aided language input, you're going to pick a few target words to model, right? So you're not modeling every single word. You're picking a few targets. But who's picking the targets? That's something we will talk about. But next, I want you to meet the players. Okay, so we've set the stage, and now we're meeting the players. So if you had to guess who the players are, I think we all know that, like, we as like very, very close individuals to those communicators, like parents, family members, siblings, all of that are definitely going to be a big, important part. But the real answer for who should be using aided language input is truly everyone, right? So we've got parents and caregivers. Sure, we have siblings. We have OT, PT, and speech, right? That's really important. I want to repeat that. OT, PT, and speech. Yes, the speech therapist is working on growing and developing those skills, but I very much think of the device as their voice, right? It's giving them access to communicate. And I've often had to remind everybody that we all bring our voice everywhere we go, right? When I went to PT for a long time, when I would go to PT, do you think I didn't talk during PT? Do you think I didn't want to express to them if something was hard or it hurt my body? Of course I did, right? They need their device during PT. They need their device during OT. They need their device in the community because those community members, those are communication partners. The medical staff. I had a parent who, I feel like as a parent, you kind of need to see that aha moment. You believe in your kid, it's important, but like until they show you that they're starting to understand it, you feel like you're just doing a lot, right? And I had a parent who, before going to the doctor, talked to their daughter about what was bothering them. I think it's your belly hurts and I think you feel sick. And, I want you to talk to the doctor about it. And the next day, mom came in so excited to tell me that she was able to talk to the doctor about what parts of her body hurt. Like, how incredible that they can advocate for themselves, right? We want these AAC users to be able to do all the same things. So everybody is part of the players in our, on our stage. Okay, I hear a lot about device abandonment kind of in the speech and language world. And, it's sad because I know it's a lot of work to get a device, right? I work for a company where I'm doing a lot of that back end work and the parents are working day and night to get everything we need to get them a device. So when I hear that they've kind of had issues using it and there's this device abandonment, it just makes me think like, why? What can we do differently? And some reasons for device abandonment are partner training and support issues, right? So communication partners are arguably the most important piece to success for our individuals using AAC. So it's important that what you learn here today is how to be a better communication partner, but that you take that and you share that with others. It can't just stop here, right? So since we know that communication partners include anyone that that device user will come into contact with, we need to spread the love, right? We need to teach others. And I'm not saying become a mini SLP for your child. That's not your job. That's not your role. But being an advocate is, right? Being an advocate for them using that device. It's so important. And then when we look at support issues, you know, some of those would include just lack of opportunities to use it. And then maybe the vocabulary doesn't match the client's abilities, or vice versa, it's too complicated. So it doesn't meet their current needs. So those are some of the support issues we see. Okay. Communication partners. So what I want to talk a little bit about here is some of the research that Kent and Walsh and McNaughton did when they were observing communication partners. They looked at the traits and they kind of generalized a list here. And I can 1000% admit to all of you, having never really met most of you probably, that I am guilty of all of these things, right? I blame my Italian heritage, that I take up most of the turns, and I frequently interrupt. And then as an SLP, I'm always trying to like get something, right? I'm always trying to show and teach so that they can then show me. But what we found in general, so outside of just me, is that as a communication partner, we tend to take a lot of the turns. We mostly ask yes, no questions. I still have to work at this one. We frequently interrupt, right? We focus a lot on the technology. And this is kind of where I come in as a consultant to help ease that stress over the technology, because it can be very intimidating. And then we just naturally provide very limited opportunities for communication, right? Then comparatively, when we think about people who use AAC, typically, right? So this is just observed traits of AAC users. They're more passive. They maybe have limited initiation. You know, think about, they might not know how to initiate, but they also have a really hard time like getting in there in a conversation, because device users in general are going to just require a little bit more patience, kind of time. And we'll talk a bit about some of those strategies. So a little harder to initiate. They know more than they can say. They often only respond in obligatory contexts, right? So when asked something, when told to do something, that sort of thing. They communicate for a limited number of reasons. And I hear this a lot from people working with device users of, well, they only request. Okay, well, let's think about what the communication partners are doing to support other functions of communication. And then they use restricted grammar, right? So when we look at those and we compare them, you know, it's not very equal. It's not very even. I think of the you know, unbalance I see when I look here. And don't forget, I've already admitted to all of you, I am on that side of taking up all the turns. And it actually took me, that student who I mentioned in the beginning, who told me about focus, he taught me a lot of this. He taught me to slow down. He taught me not to take all the turns. What he taught me was to balance out those scales again, right? So we need to keep this information in mind. We need to think about, am I taking up all the turns? Am I interrupting? Am I focusing too much on this technology and not giving them a whole lot of opportunities to communicate? What am I doing that I might be able to change, right? Takes a little bit of reflection on your own characteristics and thinking how you can kind of balance those out, because those traits directly affect the person using AAC. Are my Italian roots coming out with my hands flying all over the screen? Okay. So if we want to grow and increase the skills of people who use AAC, right? Like The good news is, what I can tell you is we can change this. We can change how we interact as communication partners. We can change our communication style to help others communicate. And we can learn strategies that increase their interaction and kind of flip it into them being more of the interactive party and not relying so much on us, right? So they need us to change our interaction styles to support them. So that's something we need to think about. So instead of these, right? So taking up all those turns, asking them yes, no questions. I once at my previous school told everybody I was going to take a tally every time I heard a yes, no question, because it really, you don't even know you're doing it sometimes. And I would tally it up per teacher, per parapro, whatever it may be. I would tally it up and we'd talk about it in a one-on-one. And there were so many times that I said, it was during this interaction, you asked a yes, no question. Oh, I did? They don't even know, right? Do you want fruit? It's a yes, no question, right? So it just rolls off our tongues, but that's a tricky one. So I want people to really keep that one in mind because we don't even know we're doing it. We frequently interrupt, right? I think life is really fast. We focus on the technology, we provide limited opportunities, but what if we tried these things? What if we wait? We look expectantly. What if we ask open-ended questions? Do you want fruit or do you want veggies for snack? What if we give active feedback? Focus on what the person wants to talk about and provide opportunities through modeling. What would that look like? Would that really flip the script and support our communication, our AAC communicators, support their communication, right? Okay, so that brings me to the next part of the show, which is practice, practice, practice. Okay. What does that look like? So here, look at the car go. Waiting 10 seconds, looking towards the individual using a device, giving them that expectant look of, do you have anything to say? Do you want to join in? So this expectant look was really hard for me to learn in the beginning. Pausing, like doing this like count to 10 technique can feel really weird. But I tell you, once you do it, and on second number 9 in your head, that AAC user hits go. You're like, okay, they just need a little processing time. Or maybe they need a minute to get their body ready to hit the device button go, right? So counting to 10 is, you're not counting it out loud. We're just counting in our heads, right? And we're counting to 10. And if you see that they're thinking about it and they're working on responding, you can give them a little more time. 10's not a hard and fast number. After 10, you're like, you missed it. If you see that they're working towards giving you a response, they're looking at their device, maybe their body is starting to get ready to move to touch it, or if they're eye gaze users or a different access method, you see that they're trying, give them more time. If it doesn't appear that they're working to respond, maybe they're kind of off now, like, squirrel, we've lost their attention, then, you can try a different technique, right? But just practice pausing. It doesn't feel natural. It doesn't. So practicing it will help it to feel more natural. Somebody once described this to me as like if you ask a question, right? So I ask a question and it's an open-ended question and I'm giving them their 10 seconds and then I interrupt and I ask the question again. It's almost like rebooting a computer. They're like starting over, right? So you're not giving them full time to boot all the way up into thinking of their response, moving their body, how they need to, etc. So we don't want to interrupt them because then they almost have to like start over. So that expectant pause, that wait. Now the look expectantly is an important piece of this. I'm not asking them a question and then like looking around. I'm asking them a question and then or I'm talking to them, or I'm encouraging communication. And then I look at them and I do like this expectant wait, which is my eyebrows might be up, my head might be tilted, and I'm looking at them saying, it's your turn, right? Nonverbal communication of your turn. So just that expectant look is the add-on to that wait. Okay. Individuals using AAC devices communicate in less than 10% of the speed of traditional speech. This is another thing that I've learned throughout the years from my AAC users, is that speed is not on their side, right? No matter what, no matter how fast they get, it's never quite as fast as it is for traditional speech, especially for those using alternative access, right? But just in general, they have to learn where all those words live on their device, and then they have to physically make their body go find them, right? So it can take longer for them to compose their thoughts, get their body to move the way they need to, get their head just right, get their eyes just right, and put those words together to speak. I know quite a few very, very proficient device users, and it's still always slower, right, than the conversation that's happening around them. So really being mindful of that. So this does serve to me as a reminder that we need to give them time to think about what they want to say, how they want to say it, and move their bodies to say it, right? And then start that process for the next word. I've had adults who are looking for jobs, and one of the things they kind of have expressed to me is they just can't keep up with the speed, not because they're not smart, right? Because they're using a device and they just can't keep up with the pace that everybody's moving around them. So they are in the middle of creating their participating in that conversation, and people have already finished the topic. So just being mindful that they're not going to move at the same speed as us. So we've got to give them time. Okay. I told you guys this one was hard for me. Asking open-ended questions. So do you want bubbles, right? Is a yes or a no question, right? So open-ended questions typically do not require a specific piece of information. They just require either, close-ended just require a yes or no or a noun. But if we change the way we ask those questions and they're open, then those start with the how or why or what do you think? My favorite used to be, tell me about it, or tell me about that fruit that you ate. What did you think about it? Right? So I'm kind of leaving it open. And we do this to encourage more thought, more generalization, and it increases language. It adds details, and it allows them to be in control of what they want to say, right? So we want to increase the opportunity to add language. And I am so sad that let me see one more time. Oh, anything else you want to tell them? Sure. Next. Star. I hope I will be your next star. Okay. All right. So some of you may actually know. So that's Kylie. Kylie and I have become friends in the recent year and a half. And her mom, rather than asking her, can you tell them your name, tell them where you live, these like very close-ended questions, she keeps it very open by saying, is there anything else you want to tell them? And she didn't want to tell them her name or where she lived. She wanted to let them know that she's going to be a star and she hopes that you recognize that. And I love, love, love this. And I also love that she gave her the time to make that answer, right? To create that sentence. And you can see on Kylie's face as she just knows she's funny, that little smirk, right? So this is another example of wait time as well. But those open-ended questions are you're just going to get the funnest answers, the best responses. So I'm really glad that video worked. Yay. Okay. So wait, giving active feedback. Okay, let's talk about that for a minute. So this can be tricky, and I get a lot of calls of like, well, they don't always say the right thing, right? But what we want to be really remembering is we want to respect their communication attempt, and we want to respond to all of their communication attempts, no matter what, whether it's correct or incorrect. Even when you think that it wasn't what the individual intended, respond, don't just dismiss it, right? So I was in a therapy session once with a little girl. We were working on her device, and she was going into the bottom right quadrant, and she was going to say the word turn, but she bumped the word sleep. So it said sleep. And I fell on my desk and started snoring, right? And she chuckled and she laughed so hard that that became a word that not only stuck in her brain, but I gave it context, right? I responded, even though I knew it was a mistake, right? We were talking about whose turn it was. I knew she was going to the word turn. It was right next to it. The fact that I responded and didn't just dismiss it created an opportunity to learn a new word. And so, of course, what did we do for the rest of the speech session? We put Nicole to sleep, right? But that was so worth it, so fun. It reinforced that whole communication attempt. It provided a sense of connection. It created this participation that was way more fun than using the word turn, right? And it can really help that the AAC communicator learn that their words are meaningful, right? So we can reinforce that communication attempt by using strategies like expanding on it, recasting, so they can say something and we add to it. That's another way to respond. I've also seen people say like, huh, that doesn't really make sense. I wonder what you mean. Can you tell me more, right? So just being honest of, I'm not sure what that meant, because sometimes it has meaning. We just don't know what it means in that moment. So you can give that active feedback. You've got go, and then it's an opportunity to expand on the language. All right, let's see if my next video will work too. Yay, I think it will. Okay, so here's a video that shows an SLP providing feedback to an unexpected response, and she gives it some meaning.
Awesome. Hole in the egg, right? Look, what do you think? Do you think that that's awesome? It was cool? Well, well, thank you. I was just saying that's the frog because he laid a bunch of eggs. Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay.
So there she says, congratulations, right? Doesn't really fit the context of the story. So what does she say? Thank you, right? You just go with it. Assign it some meaning. When somebody says congratulations, the next thing you say back to that is thank you, right? And then she said go because she wanted her to go on with the story. Read the next part. Okay. One of the other strategies I mentioned was focusing on the person. And I know that this can be hard when academics are really important. They're in school, or they're in an ABA clinic, and the BCBA has really specific targets we're looking at. But in addition to kind of all of those things, we need to focus on what the person might want to talk about, right? So this sounds like no different than following a child's lead during an activity. So we want to think about all these things that encourage communication. Like my example of the sleep, that made her laugh, right? That built a connection between the two of us, and it made her laugh. It made her feel like it was silly, and she liked it. So that's what created all of that opportunity to learn the word sleep in my speech session, which wasn't even my target, right? But I followed her lead. What do they like to do for fun? Let's find some fun, engaging things to talk about. What is gross? Kids love to talk about things that are gross. Adults love to talk about things that are gross, right? What makes them happy? What makes them mad? Let's really think about that person. That person using AAC might not want to talk about the very specific vocabulary that we have identified as important, right? Although we want to continue to work on those words and those targets, we can also incorporate what the person wants to talk about. So by doing these things, those strategies we just talked about, it provides opportunities. It creates conversation, right? So we want to create more opportunities, and we want to model on our device. So I want to talk a little bit about providing those opportunities and modeling on a device, right? We all know that creating opportunities is important because it helps them learn something new, and it takes time and practice. And we know that they have fewer opportunities to communicate when we look at those characteristic traits, right? So we want to think about that. And we want to remember that the device is a tool, but it does not create opportunities to communicate. We, the people, do, right? We are the ones that create the opportunities. So you could tell her, I like the baby with the flower. Ooh, right? You're talking about it and you're giving her some of these words that if she wants to say she likes it too, she could say like, or she could say flower. She could say any of those words, right? We're just giving her words so that she knows A, where they live on the device, and B, that this is an opportunity for us to communicate. Okay, so we talked at the very beginning about kind of practicing foundational skills. And we know that the more you do something, the better you become. So first, we need to think about how to get started, right? And for individuals using AAC, we need to create these opportunities. You know, that was my whole job as an SLP, was in those sessions, creating reasons to talk, right? So we want to think about it. We want to make a plan. And this doesn't have to be a formal plan where you're writing things down. You're just thinking, okay, what's the activity and what are some words that can go with that activity? Take a walk through their day. So there are a lot of resources out there where you actually do this like whole analysis of their day. I used to do this with my teachers. And what are some target words that they could say during that time? So at, you know, the start of school, when everybody's coming in, what a great opportunity to work on. Hi, how are you? Right? What's up? Those like social skills. Then when it's calendar time, what are some opportunities to communicate during that time? So you're really walking through their day and thinking about where you can create these opportunities. And I do truly mean it from my heart to start small and build, right? Rome wasn't built in a day. We can't expect everybody to pick up this device, no different than our device users, and know where everything lives, right? So really starting small and building. So I just want to remind you of that number that sticks out in my head all the time that we talked about earlier. And that was a study that they pulled that number and they used a school team to encourage them to use 200 opportunities per day of a word that they were targeting, right? And that sounds really like a lot, but it really isn't a whole lot when you are thinking about how much I know I said I'm Italian, so I talk a lot, but like in general, as a society, we talk a lot, right? So using some of these targets 200 times a day can happen pretty easily. And it makes sense, right? So the more we do something over and over and over, the more our neuroplasticity changes, right? And cells that fire together, wire together. So the more you do something, your brain, so smart, right? It says, huh, I wonder if they're going to do this again. I'll try to remember it. And then the more we do it, the brain says, yep, this is important. I should remember it. I should remember it. And then the more automatic it becomes. And what's really fascinating about automaticity is that once it's automatic, you can focus on all the good stuff, right? You don't have to think about where a word lives in the device. You can think about how you're using it and how you're communicating and all the fun things that go with talking. I think a lot about I don't think about, turning on my blinker or hitting my gas and my brake. I don't think about those things. They're so automatic, but I can listen to music and really enjoy the song, right? That's what I get to focus on. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time here talking about core vocabulary words, but I wanted you guys to hear this word. It's kind of a word that you might hear from SLPs. You might hear it kind of out there every once in a while, but core vocabulary are 80% of the words are spoken or written in English, but it only comes from a small subset of words, right? Those are core vocabulary words. The other 20%, there's a gazillion of them there's fringe vocabulary words. There's a whole bunch of fringe vocabulary words, but we don't use them as much, right? So there's less core, but we use them more. More fringe, use them less. So what are core and what are fringe? So classes of core words include prepositions, verbs, questions, pronouns, adjectives, adverbs, interjections. What they don't include are nouns. Okay, nouns are the fringe vocabulary. I always use the term, they don't give you as much bang for your buck, right? So if you're talking specifically about food items that you want to eat at, I don't know, Dunkin' Donuts, like you want a donut, you want egg bites, those don't really transfer to different contexts outside of maybe Dunkin' Donuts and maybe like not even Starbucks. Look at that. I was going to say egg bites, but not donuts, right? But if you talk about eat and you talk about drink and you talk about chew and bite, all of those words, those core vocabulary words, can go across any context. You can bring those words to Starbucks. You can bring them home during mealtime. You can bring them to school for snack time. They kind of go across, more bang for your buck, right? And this is just another way to look at it. So they go across gender, age, topic, setting, disability. It doesn't matter. And I said I won't go into this too long, but essentially they got this data by putting little microphones on preschoolers, and they wrote down everything they said. They did a language sample, and they weren't using all that much fringe vocabulary, right? So they weren't using all of these very specific nouns. They were using no, mine, go, want, not, all of these bigger, more robust words. Those are the core vocabulary words. So when you think about what's more useful in a variety of settings, our fringe word, which would be car, is less useful. Go can apply to multitude of different settings. Okay. If anybody has more questions about core vocabulary, I'm happy to chat, more about that, but I don't want to spend too much time here. Okay. Let's talk about what can you model on. So I hear this a lot. Well, I don't have a modeling device. If all of the SLP stars aligned in my world, everybody would have their own device and a family member would have a modeling device. But of course, that is a dream. That's not real life. So you can model on the person's device. Oftentimes when I do that, I do let them know that, Nicole's going to use your device today too. Because some kids do not like that. Some adults do not like that. It is their voice, so we have to be respectful. But if that's something they're comfortable with, we can use their device. We can use our own iPad or speech generating device. We can use a board, a light tech board, or you can download, here are some downloadable softwares you can use. You can have a poster. I put other here because I have met parents who have made pillows with their communication device, their child's communication device on it. And that way, when it's charging downstairs and they want to talk before bed, they still can on the pillow. Come on, parents, so smart. Okay. I do want to take a minute to just think about important considerations, because as you're all listening here, you might be looking at some of these pictures or hearing this information thinking, well, I think most of you are parents, like my kid's device looks different. So I want you to remember, every device should be customized to meet the AAC user's needs. And this can be simple customizations that include just like their favorite people or favorite foods. But it also can be modifications to support vision, CVI, maybe using high contrast symbols, maybe not. Maybe decreasing the complexity so that the user isn't required to distinguish these small details visually, right? Like the happy is a smile, but the excited is a smile with teeth. That can be really hard for somebody with vision challenges or CVI to distinguish. Maybe adding some color coding in to help increase their focus or the saliency. I want you to really remember that every device might look different, and that's okay. I do usually request not to modify the home screen of a device too much in terms of the symbols. A lot of times there's a lot of research that goes into the words they picked and the symbols they've picked. So there's usually a reason behind why those words or symbols are the way they are. So, I try to say, stay away from messing too much with the home screen. You can change the color and the contrast and things like that, but The other pages are there to be customized to that device user. And this is another misconception I see a lot from parents, from SLPs, from everybody, is that they want to put a limited number of words on the screen, right? So you can see in the top left corner, there's 8 words. They think that's better than that middle one that I have circled because that one has 60 words, right? 60 buttons on the screen. And usually they think they have to like grow to 60, but that's not really the way language was intended. What we want to do is give them as many buttons on a screen as we can that they can physically access in whatever method they're doing that. And we can always hide some of them. So maybe if they are very like, it's too visually complex right now, we can hide some of them and show them as they learn. But what gets tricky is the less buttons on a screen, the more they have to navigate in their device, right? So the more work we're asking them to do to say a word. So if they are able to manage smaller buttons, we want to do that. Okay. The other thing I just want everybody to think a little bit about is that if we're practicing foundational skills, that we all need to be doing it the same way consistently across communication partners. So if there is a sequence, you know, these are called sequences, like how you get to a word. We don't want to all be modeling different ways. So a communication notebook is nice for this, where you're all talking about, you know, I modeled the word apple today, and this is the path I took so that everybody can model it that way. I always love a good communication notebook. You can talk about targets, all of those things. And then the other thing I just want to remind everybody is don't take words away. If they graduate from first grade and go to second grade, you know, I don't want you to think that that means the first grade teacher's name can come out of their device. I personally loved my first grade teacher, Mrs. Forty, and I talked about her for many years after first grade. So we want to give them the opportunity to still talk about people, things that they used to like, you know, things in their past. You don't have to take it away. And then the other thing I see with these talking about customizations is a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So everybody's input is so important, and we want to make sure that we're taking everybody on the team's considerations and expertise into the system. But what we want to not do is lose the integrity of the system. So if everybody's changing things, you know, moving things, thinking they're doing the right thing, how can the AAC user really keep up? So that goes back to that communication notebook. Maybe there's one person who modifies the actual device, you know, just making sure everybody's on the same page. And we talked about how there's a lot of players in this, right? So I want to talk quickly about encouraging communication, not requiring it. We want to encourage them to talk. We want to create those opportunities, right? We don't want to tell them what they have to say. I don't know what they want to say. So I do hear this a lot. I hear this in my own family. Tell me you want cookies. Tell me you want more cookies while they're, you know, grabbing cookies. That's really requiring them to talk, right? Should we do more bubbles or should we be all done, right? That was one I used all the time because it encouraged them to be in charge. They could even tell me they wanted something, you know, all done and do something different. Pointing to something to label, what is this, right? Requiring that communication or talking about it. He's playing with the ball. That looks so fun, right? Encouraging it. Okay, so dress rehearsal. So now we're going to practice kind of starting small and simple and thinking about all those strategies we just talked about. And one small step that I think, you know, is an easy thing to make as your first step, not easy in the sense that you'll remember to do it all the time, easy in the sense of like, it's not requiring you to do all that much on the device. It's just making sure they have it with them at all times. And I know I have a device user in my family. We have literally been in the car about to leave and somebody says, where are his words? And we're all looking at each other like, ah, right? We'll have to turn the car around and go get them. But at least we've started to establish a habit in our routine that the words need to come with us at all times, right? Okay, making a plan. So working with the team, make a plan, thinking about what words you want to talk about, maybe picking an activity, right? Or a toy. I usually like to say, pick something that you already are doing, a toy they already love. Now's not really the time to try a new activity or a new game. So if they love to sit next to you and cook, that's your toy, that's your activity, right? They're going to be cooking with you. That's the activity. Bring the device, have it nearby, step one. devices in the kitchen with you, right? Step 2 might be to choose some words, right? So here are those core vocabulary words I talked about. We have a list on our website of the most 100 most frequently used words. So that's a good starting place. So picking some words that might go with cooking a meal, 1 to 3, great place to start. And then it's time for you to take the stage, right? Now you're ready to go out, try it with your AAC learner, and implement it into their daily routines. And I'm going to wrap up here. And I just, from a PRC Saltillo standpoint, if any of the parents on the call do have someone using one of our devices, there are a ton of resources on our website. Please, this is our consultant support page. You can scan this QR code. It'll connect you to your consultant. I am not all of Georgia. I am North Georgia. Sherby is going to be South Georgia. And then we have Valerie, who is more on the Savannah side. So, you know, our consultants are all over. We're here to help. And that is it. I only left a few minutes for questions. I apologize. I had a lot to get through. But thank you so, so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I hope that putting this into a little bit more of a digestible presentation, thinking about all the parts and pieces was helpful. But I would love to hear your feedback.
Nicole, thank you so much for giving us your time today. I mean, just wow. And thank you for including your email as well, in case anyone had any follow-up questions for you. And I'll just say that out loud. It's nicole.palumbo@prcsaltillo.com. Sorry, that's prc-saltillo.com. If anyone has any questions, you are welcome to either add your questions to the chat or unmute yourself and ask Nicole. Please feel free.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I definitely learned a lot, so I appreciate your presentation. I do have a question. So my toddler is minimally verbal. She just says a few words, and I was curious, how do you know your child is ready or able to use a AAC device?
That is a fantastic question. And I think sometimes we worry if we introduce AAC, is that going to stop the verbal development?
Yeah.
Is it going to hinder it? Is it going to change it? This is how I look at it as an SLP. I think if they are verbal, I want to encourage verbal communication at all times. I never want them to feel like that doesn't matter. It's not important. However, if they are not at the same level as their peers and that gap starts to get bigger, right? Their receptive language is getting higher, but their expressive language is always kind of trying to catch up. A device will help to close that gap, right? And what the research shows, which is really wonderful and really promising, is it absolutely does not hinder verbal speech. If anything, it increases verbal speech. So there's no right or wrong answer here. I say, like, use your mom gut, but when you feel like that gap is getting kind of big and they're starting to maybe show some frustration, you know, they have things to say and they can't, you know, that sometimes it's apraxia. We have it here. We can't get our mouth to say it the right way. It's taking a lot of effort. AAC is just going to be a tool in their toolbox, right? And then the other piece that is important to think about is if they're still using verbal speech, that we accept. We don't make them say it on the device, right? So they say, Mom, you don't say, I didn't understand you, use your device. You understood, right? Mom, yeah, what's up? But if the rest of it, they need support, that's what the device comes in handy for. Does that answer your question? Does that make sense?
It does. Yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, Nicole. So I have a 3-year-old that has been approved for his device for like 4 months, and it finally has come in. And so we are about to get it delivered to us and set up. But we're creating his IEP today. And so once his paperwork is all finished, he will be starting preschool. And so I have been told that they don't recommend taking the device to school right away while they're still learning like the process. And so I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I've heard that too, but if we think about the players and the communication partners, they're at school the majority of their day, right? So even if they hear that device being utilized in that modeling, for little snippets of their day, that's better than nothing. So I do feel like the device is important to go with them everywhere they go. When I was an SLP in a school, they hated me because I would bring it to them if they forgot it on the desk. I'd like walk over and be like, they forgot their voice, and plop it on the table. So I know it can be an extra thing to remember and an extra thing to do, but it really is a nice way to just immerse everybody, have the same expectation. And then on the IEP, some of the goals can be considered, I always wrote goals that would be multimodal. Multimodal meaning whatever that child uses is accepted, whether it's a device, whether it's their voice, whether it's them using a nonverbal means of communication, sign language. So, I think incorporating it would get everybody on the same page, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I was leaning towards that thought process anyways. And they're like, well, they don't really like it until they've got like a good understanding. And I'm like, but how is
Right.
he?
The
Okay.
understanding is going to come with seeing it in use, right? Like everything I talked about just there is modeling throughout the whole day, not just specific times at home or with the SLP.
Right.
And some of that comes with training the team to understand how to incorporate a device. So whoever you got that device through usually will come with some AAC consultant support. So use that person to help build, bridge that gap.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And somebody just said, definitely put it in the IEP. You don't
Yeah.
name it specifically, but because it could change, but a speech
Mhm.
generating device, keep it general. I always used multimodal because I never wanted I didn't want anybody to think they can't accept a different mode of communication because it's just a tool in their toolbox.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hello. Hi, Nicole.
Hi.
Hi. I had a question, or I don't know, yeah, a question statement. But my son, so I'm kind of like an OG with this thing, right? He's 12 now. He initially got his device when he was 3, but when he started middle school, they changed him to LAMP, right?
Okay.
And I'm like, oh my God. So I'm jumping in every LAMP train I can, at this point. Because it was, to me, I don't know, initially, how the homepage, I call it, how it was different, but this is more about like verbs and just trying to like figure all of this out.
Yep.
Because initially, like when he was in elementary school, that was an issue for me because when he started middle, they were so surprised that he wasn't using his device more. But that's kind of like how I found out that they weren't using it. Like I was using it at home, but they weren't really using it in the school.
Right.
But now with him being in middle school and Kyle, like his recent diagnosis, we've been in speech for 8 years and it went to apraxia, right?
Okay.
So he has the words and he puts them together. And I was just piggybacking on when you stated if they say mom, you don't give them the device to say that, right? But with Kyle now having like he has more words and he'll give me clues. Like last night he wanted to tell me about the dentist, so he said green. He said green tablet, and he said one of the dentist assistants' names. So I'm like, oh, you're talking about the dentist office. But in instances like that, should I still figure out a way to communicate with him through the device? Because of course, as mom, I'm figuring out the clues, but that doesn't mean that someone else can.
Right. And you're exactly right. Oh my goodness. I
Okay.
love hearing that he's using this descriptive way, like all these words to basically tell you what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
And what's tricky is in that moment, what I would do is say, oh, you're talking about the dentist. And I would model the word dentist on his device, right?
Okay.
Because as mom, you're always going to know more clues about something than like
Mhm.
the person who sees him for a very short amount of time, 30 minutes a week, right?
Okay.
But
Yeah.
what he's doing is genius. It's so smart. He's describing the words, right? So if I don't have the word photosynthesis in my device, but I can say green, grow, sun, I can give you those clues. I would continue to encourage him to do that. I think that's fantastic.
Okay.
And then what he needs to learn is if somebody says, I still don't know what you're saying, bud, to give more.
And
That's the
that's
strategy you want to teach him.
Okay. All right.
Yep. And there's
Thank
a
you.
LAMP training coming to Georgia in person
Oh,
in December. Parents get 50% off, and a lot of parents give me really good feedback on it. So look on our
okay.
website. It's coming in December.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Any other burning questions for Nicole before we end our day? Okay. Well, Nicole, we really can't thank you enough for giving us your morning, just walking us through all this information. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much for today. And we have your contact information if we have any further questions. And we look forward to the next time, Nicole. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun in the questions. I love to answer questions, so please reach out if you have more. Thank you so, so much.
That's wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thanks, Nicole.
Bye. Thank you.